Welcome to tonight's Terror, where you can expect original scary stories. Nothing here is written or narrated by AI. If you enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for visiting, and enjoy the story.
Last spring, I went on a solo hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. I'd heard stories of how beautiful the region was at that time of year, the kind of landscape that looked like a painting, with the green of the leaves and the brush popping like you'd never seen before. I'd been looking forward to the trip for months, eager for some peace, fresh air, and time to reflect. What I found instead was something far darker than any horror story I'd ever read or seen. The first few days and nights of the hike were perfect. I followed well-marked trails, camped under a blanket of stars, and leaned into the solitude of the wilderness. But on the third day, something changed. The trail I was following split unexpectedly. It didn't take me long at all to come to a decision, but over the next 90 minutes, I began to sense I'd chosen wrong. However, I impressed myself by not panicking. I had a map, my compass, and enough experience to find my way back, I thought. I should have been able to tack back along the path I was on and find the fork again. It wasn't easy to orient myself with landmarks, or even the sun at some points because of the height of the trees and the thickness of the cover. After more than 2 hours of what I thought was the process of retracing my steps, nothing around me matched the map, or even felt vaguely familiar. The light was fading and casting long shadows through the trees. I had the sinking realization that I was very lost. Better said, I knew I was very lost. I stopped to get my bearings, but no matter which direction I looked, everything seemed unfamiliar. There was no sound of running water or any of the wildlife I'd heard earlier in my journey. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to press down on me. The occasional tree creaking or twig breaking in the distance registered in my ears, but I refused to begin thinking about what they might mean. I thought about setting up camp for the night and trying again in the morning. But something about the atmosphere felt so off, so different. Like I was very far from civilization, but still not alone. Though I couldn't see or hear anyone. Just as the last light was slipping away, I saw it, a trail of smoke rising in the distance, somewhere deep in a valley below. I perked up and felt the first jolt of hope in hours. A camp or a cabin meant safety, right? I figured I could ask for directions, at the very least spend the night somewhere sheltered. Even pitching my tent beside some established spot would be a comfort. I started toward the smoke, making my way down the slope, though it was more treacherous and dense than I expected. It took nearly 2 hours to reach the valley, and by the time I got there, it was fully dark. That's when I saw the town. It was nestled in a clearing, a cluster of old, weathered buildings, most of them dark, except for a few that had flickering lanterns in the windows. First, I passed 2 darkened outbuildings near the forest line. They were positioned like old-fashioned sentry guard posts. I had never seen buildings quite like this except in movies. They looked really old, but not abandoned, and not falling down. There was no sound, no sign of life apart from the lanterns. And yet something about this settlement looked very lived in and cared for. The houses were built from rough-hewn wood, some of them looking hundreds of years old, but sturdy and waterproof. A church sat at the center, its steeple looming like a skeletal finger pointing toward the sky. The symbol on top wasn't a cross, though. It looked more like the figure of a flame, or maybe snakes. It was too dark to know. There was no sign of movement in the outbuildings by the woods. I was about to break through the forest line and wander around, but paused just short. What was this place? Why was it here? And most concerning, who would live here? I took stock of my situation and decided that entering the town was my best bet. Leaving would have put me back in the same situation, hopelessly lost. I wouldn't even know what direction to set out in if I turned around now. Once I'd made up my mind, I felt a wave of relief. At least now I was taking action. Whoever lived here might not let me stay, but they must know which way I should go. The relief was short-lived. The moment I stepped into the town, an unsettling feeling washed over me. Silence was suffocating, but it was more than that. The air felt thick, almost as if I had walked into a wall of pure humidity. My breath caught in my throat on the pure tension of it. I began to get the distinct impression that I was being watched. I approached the nearest house and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I was about to move on to the next house when the door creaked open on its own, just a few inches. Inside, the house was dark, save for the faint glow of a lantern sitting on a table. I called out, "Hello?" But my voice sounded too loud, echoing off the bare wooden walls. Then I heard them, soft footsteps behind me. I spun around, and standing in the middle of the clearing was a figure. A man, dressed in simple, old-fashioned clothes, like something from the 19th century. His face was gaunt, eyes hollow, and he stared at me with a focus that made my skin crawl. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I got lost on the trail. I was hoping for some directions, maybe a place to stay for the night." He didn't move, didn't blink. "No one leaves the valley," he said. His voice dead, automatic, almost like he was repeating a slogan. A chill ran down my spine. I pretended I hadn't heard him. "Can I refill my water bottles?" He stared at me. His posture did not change. He showed no sign of beckoning me toward a faucet or a well. "No one leaves the valley," he repeated. "So, no water?" I replied, with a feeble attempt at humor. He looked perplexed, his eyebrows furrowed toward his sun-browned nose. Then his unreadable, stony countenance returned. Before this exchange could continue, more figures appeared out of the shadows, silent, slow-moving. Men, women, children, all dressed in the same outdated clothing, their eyes unblinking and empty like the first man's. They formed a loose circle around me, their expressions unreadable. An exhausted-looking woman held what looked like a washboard with bits of meat falling through the grates. The sense that I was in the wrong place was only half my alarm. It felt like I was in the wrong time here as well. "We serve the Lord here," another woman said, her voice thin and cold. "All who enter must follow his will." Panic started to claw at me, the skin on the back of my neck growing hot. "I didn't mean to come here uninvited. I just need help getting back to the trail." The first man shook his head slowly. "There is no trail back. The path leads to him, to his light." "To the fire," the crowd murmured in unison. Before I could process what any of this meant, they began to close in, their movements synchronized, like they'd done this many times before. A half circle began to close behind me. I saw a rope and a chain being passed from a young woman to a boy. I lost track of her as I tried to keep my eyes on all of them at once. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away, only to find myself pinched toward the small church at the center of town. The door was open, and inside I could see a flickering light, candle flames casting menacing shadows on the walls. The group herded me toward the entrance, and I stumbled inside, too terrified to resist. The moment I crossed the threshold, the heavy door slammed shut behind me with a deadened thud. Inside, the church was cold and damp. The pews were adorned with dried sticks and vines woven together into grotesque totems and fastened to the end of the row. Each was smeared with something dark and dried. At the end of the room, an altar stood, draped in tattered cloth, and there, kneeling before it, was a figure. His back was to me, but I could see that he was dressed in long, flowing robes, his head bowed in prayer. He spoke without turning around. "He brings us only the lost, and only we can save them." I wanted to scream, to bolt for the door, but my feet felt glued to the floor, and the crowd was pushing in behind me as if there was a spectacle waiting inside. "We will wash you," he said, his back still turned. His voice reverberated through the room as he gazed upward. "You bend your knee to him and know him." I looked up and couldn't see anything. The ceiling was either impossibly high or painted completely black. At that moment, I realized what they were. It wasn't too great a leap. This was a cult, isolated, forgotten, and warped by whatever twisted faith they'd built around themselves. The crowd parted quickly, and a woman strode up the center aisle toward me. She carried a metal bucket ringed in rust. She didn't hesitate. In one motion, she reached into the bucket and heaved her hand up. I saw a streak of black, and she swiped her hand down across my face and chest. I wiped furiously at my eyes. When I could see, I noticed my hands dripping in a viscous black paint of some kind. I don't know why, but in that moment I could only note that it smelled absolutely vile. In the battle between fight or flight, the urge to be any place else won out. I lowered my shoulder into the woman's midsection and knocked her down. Dashing for the door and still covered in the black sludge, I didn't see the boy crouched in a pew near the back. He tossed the end of a rope across the aisle and someone held it taut. I tripped and went headfirst into the door. I felt a blast of pain and saw a blinding light for a second, maybe more. By some miracle, my violent fall had cracked the door ajar. I squeezed through on my hands and knees and got to my feet again as the sound of the herd of zealots pounding down the aisle behind me grew louder. A dozen or so villagers peppered the square outside. They didn't leap at me or even begin to pursue me. I got the sense that they felt no urge to expend the energy. I could feel their eyes on me, watching as I stumbled toward the woods, trying to retrace my steps, now woozy from my fall. When I reached the line of trees, I turned and surveyed the town. The people were gathered in a tight knot in the center of the cluster of buildings, the church leering down from behind. One man stepped ahead of the group and cupped his hands around his mouth to shout, "You have been marked. You'll soon know all roads lead to his hands." I turned away in horror, unwilling to think about the implications of this curse he was spewing at me. Slipping into the woods, half blind, I didn't look back again. Hours passed in a blur as I ran, tripping over roots and fallen branches, the cold night air burning in my lungs. I didn't stop until I was completely exhausted. I threw my back against a tree and gasped for air, too drained to cry. My pack and supplies were long gone, and I was dehydrated, but so grateful to put distance between me and those freaks. It was almost 2 days later when another hiker found me wandering near a marked trail. She knew right away something terrible had happened to me. I was cut to ribbons by branches snapping at my face and arms as I torn through the forest. The last patches of black paint were flaking off my face by then, but a nasty smear down my hiking shirt remained. By blind luck, I had nearly reached the fork where I had gotten lost. Recovering at a ranger station, and then later at an urgent care center nearby, I tried to explain to a state trooper what had happened. He told me it sounded like severe exhaustion and dehydration, that I must have hallucinated. But I know what I saw, what happened to me. I'll never forget their eyes, or the haunted way they spoke, like they saw some truth with such blinding certainty that they'd kill to honor it. I still have nightmares about the town in the valley, about the cold, hollow faces staring into me as I fidgeted in front of them with my hiking gear and pack. Every once in a while, I'll wake from a dream, and for a moment, I'm absolutely convinced I hear the echo of their voices bouncing off my bedroom walls, calling to me.